All right. Thank you for joining us today, everyone, for Q4. It's already November. I can't believe that. And with Q4 comes a checklist of things that we're hoping retailers at least have in their knowledge bank to think about, including taxes, clearance sales. It's a busy time for retailers and you can get distracted pretty easily. So we wanted to make sure, just like we did last year, we had a lot of feedback from last year's session. So we wanted to bring that back again and hope that everybody has the most important things top of mind when they're heading towards 2024. So we've invited Jeffrey Plattman from CohnReznick back to speak with us, including a couple of heavy hitters here from Management One. We have Mike Alec, president of Management One, the esteemed Mr. Paul Erickson, our director of mentoring, and Dane Cohen, our director of sales and Road Warrior education master. Before we get to the content, I wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping as folks are coming in out of the waiting room here, and just let you know that this is going to be a live Q&A session as well. We love questions from the audience, things that are relevant to your business. So please, right down at the bottom, hit the Q&A button and feel free to submit a question at any time. We're happy to take questions. We'll set a little bit of time aside at the end. The biggest question that we get most often is, are we recording this? 100% yes. We understand retailers lead extremely busy lives, and if you can't stay for the entire session, it's all being recorded. You can share it with your team afterwards, and we can move right along to Management One. If you're not familiar with us, thank you for joining us today. Our main purpose is really to provide financial security for our people, our clients, and our retail experts. And we do that with a specific focus on merchandise intelligence and education for independent retailers specifically. We operate with a series of core values, including a generous heart, courage, curiosity, adaptability, commitment, and collaborative efforts like this one today. So let's get into it. Jeffrey, I can start with you actually, because the thing that really pops out at year end is a lot of the tax implications, specifically with inventory that retailers really don't quite have a full grasp on. So we really wanted to pick your brain about that topic to start it off with.
Sure, great. So as you know, this is a different year than last year and hopefully a different year to next year. A lot of you potentially are sitting with too much inventory. So there's a lot of things for year round you can do. Obviously, one is to donate the inventory to a local charity. That will obviously give you a tax benefit of a contribution, which is a good thing for you to do. It adds to your public relations and your goodwill in your communities. The big thing, though, once again, is not to carry any inventory over to next year if it's slow moving or it's unsaleable. Keeping that inventory on your books will cause you probably to pay a higher amount of income taxes because the inventory is not being sold and it's not worth what you paid for it. So keep that in mind. It's very important to watch that as you get closer to your end. Another issue, as you probably all know, is that carrying too much inventory in today's market with the higher interest rates is costing more money to hold it. So once again, plan accordingly the next few months and to make your inventory as lean as possible, but also make sure what you have is saleable. So these are things that you have to watch. And although it's only November 8th, there's no time. I would start planning for this today because you're going into the holiday season, which for most people right now is an unknown. So just be careful. I always tell my clients, as it says here, manage your risk, manage your cash flow. If you're going to run into a situation where you buy too much inventory and you can't sell it, you're going to have some problems come Q1 of next year about how to pay your vendors, because for practical experience, the vendors you're dealing with are going to be more tighter and they're going to probably demand payment a little bit earlier than normal. Another item on here is, I'm sorry, go back one more slide, is your fixed assets. As many as you know, buying fixed assets, there's an immediate tax write-off in the year you incur and purchase them. So if you're going to buy a new POS system, tables, chairs, computers, I usually tell clients and companies I deal with to buy them in December to get the immediate tax write-off, as opposed to buying them in January, where you have to wait the entire year for the benefit. Next slide. So as I said a second ago about managing risk and cash flow, very, very important to watch what you're buying, what your inventory levels are. It'd be a shame to buy inventory and have to hold it over to the year end and have to get rid of it, be it promotional sales, giveaways, and really discount them. It's going to be a shame because, once again, the vendors are going to want their money and you're going to need to pay your bills. And if you're selling inventory that you're going to pay for and you're not getting full dollar for them, it's going to be a problem going into next year. And once again, this is just a timing issue. I'm assuming most of you have already purchased your holiday orders. They're on the way. Just be careful. If you're going to get a late delivery and you don't need the goods, I would really try to cancel the order if possible, because once again, you do not want to hold inventory over past the holiday season that you cannot sell. Really important for cash flow management and just managing your entire operations.
And Jeffrey, you mentioned that the holidays is a bit of an unknown. So we wanted to have Mike Alec here on today just to kind of assess the current economy, what the outlook is. I guess we'll start, Mike. You had some data to support some of the economic activity that we're looking at.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll take a quick tour give you a quick tour of the economy, what's going on now, sort of how things are looking, and kind of what to make of all the economic data that comes over. So right now, actually, the economy looks strong, right? Like generally, people don't seem to feel that way, but the facts are the economy, by the numbers, is in pretty good shape. So overall economic activity is strong and actually much stronger than expected. So third quarter GDP growth was just published a few weeks ago. It came in at plus 4.9%, right? Which is 4.9% growth is, typical growth for an economy like the US is going to be 2%, right? 2-3%. Like, so that's really solid. Jobs are plentiful. Unemployment is low, right? Unemployment is still only 3.8%, right? Like most people who want a job can get a job. People who have jobs can have money and can buy money from buy goods from retailers. And they have been spending, right? Consumer spending has remained strong. It was in September, it was plus 4% in real terms year over year. Now, in real terms, you probably hear like real GDP, real this, real that. Real just means after you adjust for inflation. So 4% after adjusting for inflation is actually pretty good. In fact, genuinely solid. Speaking of inflation has actually been coming down, right? So people have been freaked out about inflation, the price of groceries, the price of gas. In September, here's what the number was. Prices were up 3.7% year over year, meaning compared to a year before. And that rate, when we were back in the spring, we were looking at, things like 6-7% year over year growth in prices. So inflation has been moderating. Gas prices specifically have actually been coming down since mid-September. So, the Federal Reserve Bank, of the United States generally targets inflation at 2%, right? So we're still a little bit above that, but not dramatically. So inflation has been moderating. The other sort of element that's really positive is consumers have money to pay their bills for the most part, right? Like so the government agencies watch, the Federal Reserve of New York in particular looks at consumer debt delinquency. So how many consumers with how much debt are failing to make their payments on time on their mortgages, on their car loans, on their credit cards. So right now, about 3% of loan balances had sort of a late payment status in September. Just as a reference point, which is actually an historic low, like that's very near its all-time low since that number has been tracked. For example, a recent high in 2010 coming out of the big financial crisis was 12%, right? So this is, 1/4 of that level. So actually things are pretty solid. But if you go to the next slide, things may be changing for the worse, right? it's very hard to say, of course, because people have been predicting a recession now for like a year and a half or 2 years, and it still hasn't shown up. But there are some indicators that should give us pause and make us look at our businesses and our plans really hard. So one, consumers are pessimistic, right? So there's a couple of different surveys that have been around a long time that measure consumer confidence, right? So it's basically just taking a big poll of people and finding out how they feel, A, about what their situation is today, and B, more importantly, how they think things are going to be 6 months from now. And the conference board, which is one of the organizations that does this kind of survey, has found that the future expectations component of their survey has fallen below the score of 80, which probably doesn't mean anything to you, but historically, when that index for future, what people think the future is going to be like, falls below 80, it has in the past often meant a recession was on the horizon, and not the too far distant horizon. It's not 100% accurate, but the fact is people are not feeling great, right? This is like, so my friend and colleague Dane Cohen talks about the vibe session, right? So it's a vibe session, right? Like people are, like previous slides said, economy is good. It's like things are actually just fine, but people aren't feeling it for whatever reason, right? And that's true, right? And at some point, perception is going to influence reality in the economy. And of course, part of the perception, part of the funk people in might have to do with high interest rates, right? Interest rates are high, right? Like a 30-year mortgage cost you on average, the average 30-year fixed mortgage rate in early November was at 7.76%. We haven't seen that level of mortgage rates since fall of the year 2000, right? 23 years ago. Like who remembers like the year 2000, right? And that squeezes people, right? Like, as Jeff said earlier, right? Like the money that you have tied up your inventory is costing you more, right? Interest rates are the cost of money, right? There's the price of money, and money is getting more expensive. So, and interest rates, tend to make it more expensive to get a car loan, make credit card debt more expensive to carry. So that is gonna start, there's a decent chance that's gonna start squeezing people. There's maybe some signs of it. The one sign is that although on the previous slide, as I pointed out, consumer delinquency on their debt, right? Consumers being late paying their credit cards and so forth, is at an all-time low. It's actually ticking up. It actually ticked up in Q3 pretty quickly. Like it was like a jump from a ridiculously low level to a still low level, but it was a sharp change. So this could signal a change in direction, that consumers are starting to use up those cash cushions they built up during the pandemic. They've maybe been overspending, right? They had their whole revenge spending thing coming out of the pandemic. They were booking vacations, they were buying fancy watches, throwing it on the credit card. Those delinquencies have started to tick up. It's early to say, but I wouldn't rule it out. And important for retailers, most of the forecasts that are out there say, well, holiday spending growth year over year is going to be slower, right? Like, so the National Retail Federation says 3 to 4% growth over the prior year in holiday spending. And that compares to 5.4% in 2022 and a whopping 12.7% in 2021. So definitely a more muted holiday does seem to be in the cards. Now, of course, it's important to recognize that we're still building off of a record high year, right? But the growth is slowing. So, okay, I just threw a bunch of data at you, right? What do you do with all of it, right? Like it's too much for anybody to really make sense of. So here's a couple of pointers. One is, don't ignore these data points. But remember, first of all, every statistic on the economy is an average, right? It's just telling you what's happening in the economy on average. So it's probably more meaningful to look at what's going on in your local market or the vertical you're operating in or your sales channel. It's likely to be more meaningful to your business, right? If you're in a college town and your university's enrollment is growing, that's going to be more important than, whether the overall US economy is slowing down. If you're in a city where there is, Tesla's opening a new plant or there's new battery manufacturing going in, that's going to be more important than what's going on nationwide. So look at what's going on around you in your local communities. Other thing to keep in mind is that don't get in a funk about, oh my God, the economy is bad. There's tons of room for growth for great independent retailers to grow their businesses, even when the overall economy is tough, right? You know, like Airbnb, for example, which is a multi-billion-dollar corporation generating billions in free cash flow, was actually founded in the very middle of the Great Recession of 2008, right? It was a horrible time to found a business, but these guys had an idea and the sort of ability, determination to follow through on that idea and execute it. And they built a great business, even when times were tough. And objectively, you would have said, "It's a terrible time to launch a business like that. Nobody's wanting to go on vacation, but you're crazy." So, keep in mind that great retailers can always find a place to grow. And this is especially true for independent retailers, right? Like all of you are looking to take, you can get meaningful growth by taking what is a relatively small additional portion out of the overall economy, right? Like you're not, our customers at Management One are not Walmart, where, the overall economy really does matter because they're already taking hundreds of billions of dollars out of it and they're affected by economy-wide trends. You're small enough that there's always money for you to grab. So remember, these stats are averages. There's always opportunities for you, and focus on your local trends. But the thing you should pay closest attention to, above all, is actually not the stats that come out in the newspapers or on the news about the economy. It's your own data, right? Look at your own data. How are your sales, your inventory, your markdowns, your foot traffic, your conversion rates, your average order value? How are these things trending, right? Because this is really what's driving your business. And if you look at that data carefully, and if you're a Management One client, you'll look at it with the help of your retail expert, with the help of the reports you get out of Retail Orbit, you're going to find risks, right? That you're going to want to be able to, want to mitigate. Over inventory in some category. Some things are moving really slowly. Look for opportunities, because even in a bad economy, there are always opportunities. It's a particular class, particular category, particular location where you can double down. But most importantly, make a plan, right? Have a plan. Don't just wing it, right? Take your data, analyze it, make a plan to go forward. That's the best way to avoid being caught out and caught short of cash if the economy does slow down. Most important thing is look at your data and make a plan. And with that sort of whirlwind tour of the economy, I'm going to turn it over to Paul Erickson, who's going to take us on a deeper dive into sort of how to use data to make decisions and find opportunities and risks.
Great, thanks, Mike. I just want to reiterate a couple of things Mike and Jeff said that I think are important. Number one is I thought it was really interesting, the NRF statistic, Mike, that growth was 12.7% in 2021. It dropped to 5.4% in 2022, and NRF is projecting it to drop to 3 to 4% in 2023. It's getting a little tougher out there. That is for sure. And also to reiterate, Mike, what you said, which I think is important, is Walmart, the national economy means everything. For our clients as an independent retailer, it's really how you run and manage and structure your business. In my lifetime, there's been only 3 events in the economy that affected everyone. And that was 9/11, the Great Recession of 2008, and of course the pandemic. So it's how you handle your business. That's everything. And then if you want to go to the next slide, Nico, I want to just reiterate something Jeff said. Watch your end of your inventory, because it's taxable, and it's taxable due to how cost of goods and gross profit is calculated through GAAP accounting principles. And so I'd like to start out, before we look at some Management One reports, and show you how to use your Management One reports to alert you to a potential problem. I want to define the problem better and why that is. And so I want to just go through a very simple income statement. And let's take a business that does $1 million in sales a year. We have a beginning inventory at cost of $250,000. We end up purchasing $700,000 at cost worth of merchandise over the course of the year. We add that to our beginning inventory and then subtract the ending inventory of $350,000, and that gets us our cost of goods sold of $600,000. That's the math behind this. Now we take our sales of $1 million. We then subtract our cost of goods sold of 600,000, and we've got our gross profit of 400,000. We take our overhead, our expenses, our payroll, our rent, etc., and subtract that from our gross profit, and let's say that's 350,000. And what that is that's showing a net profit taxable, as Jeff was saying, of $50,000 at the end of the year. A lot of our clients probably are in a tax bracket of, say, 30%. And so they would pay the government $15,000 on that. Now let's look at this in a different way, and this is why we're talking about this. Let's look at it from the perspective of cash flow. And so we'll take the same numbers on that income statement, and we'll show cash in and cash out. So cash in is going, and cash out's purchases, 700,000 at cost. That was merchandise we bought. We've got our rent and our payroll, vast majority of our expenses, 350,000. That's our cash out. Our cash in, of course, our sales of $1 million. And if we add the cash out of the merchandise we purchased and the expenses, that same retailer that was showing a taxable income of $50,000 is actually $50,000 in the hole. And so what happened here? Well, what really happened here is that the ending inventory ended up $100,000 higher than the beginning inventory. And this is the key. If your sales are up 10% and your ending inventory is up 30% from the beginning of the year, you have a taxable income problem. And so we've really got to watch where, as Jeff said, where we end the year. And that is something we can find out now by using the reports that you're getting from Management One. Nico, if you want to go to the next slide, I'm just going to show you a couple of examples of how to spot that. So this is it's pretty small, so we're going to zoom into this, but this for the clients on this call, you're probably very familiar with these reports. This is your plan on demand merchandise report, and this is an example of, say, sweaters. And so if you want to zoom in on this one, Nico, we're just looking at see where we have here the trended open to buy down the bottom. Nico, maybe you can show your pointer where I'm at. Thank you very much. It's right down there. Negative 16,000 is the current month based on the trended sales for this month in October. 13,762 is our trended negative in terms of where we're at in terms of on order against plan for November. And then we have a positive number of 6,931. We take and add those three numbers together and we get a negative 23,185. How do we use that number? That's an important number at this time of the year because that is your overage. That is based on the projection for the next 2.5 months in this case. We can add that to the planned inventory on January 1. Just put your cursor up on that, Nico, 22,599 up at top. And we add the overage to the plan. And right now, this plane is scheduled to land with sweaters at $45,784. That is adding the 23,000 overage to the 22,599 plan. That's more inventory in unsold sweaters than we have today at 38,000. You just want to show them that number. This is how you're going to look at a problem. Are we going to have too much inventory at the end of the year? And this problem may not be for your entire store. This could be classification by classification. And it's important to spot this. Now, Nico, go to the next report. We have a report called an action report. This is a great report to look at in terms of where are the problems? Where am I going to have a problem here? And so let's just zoom in on our dress up department, which is we'll zoom in on suits over $1,600. Now, a couple of things you see right off the bat. The sales goal this month is 29,000, and we're at a trend run rate of 21. So we're not even making sales plan this month. Our current inventory is 244,503. Our inventory where we should be is 127,000. We literally have, and we're sitting here toward the end of October when this report was run, twice as many suits as what we needed. And that is creating a open to buy negative of 108,000 if we do the 29,000. But the reality is we're sitting with $116,000 negative over on the side. This is where you will start your exploration of your inventory situation to sales. And let's take a look at the merchandise plan and let's see what that looks like right now, Nico. So we'll take that same 16,000 and let's blow it up and let them see it a little bit easier, okay? So let's zero in on that. So the first thing that you see is that we've got a trended open to buy the current month of 116,000. That's really more about inventory position than anything, too much inventory. Then the next 2 months, we have a positive in November of 29 and a negative in December of 26. Again, we do the math, and the total there is $113,000 overage in their situation with inventory plus on order. We add the 113,000 overage to the planned inventory on January 1. Nico showed them where that is. That's 120,000. And what we're looking at right now is a position on inventory here of about $233,000. In other words, adding the 113,000 overage to the projected where we should be inventory in January 1 of 120 is going to give us a look into the future. 8, 9, 10 weeks from now, we are seeing this airplane land at 233. Now, let's compare that to last year. Last year, we were at 173. And so that 233 is $60,000 more inventory that we will get ready to count on January 1 than we had last year. Now, that's fine if your sales are up 34%, because that's an inventory position that will be up 34% from LY. If your sales are up 34%, then I guess that's okay. But if you look at the upper right-hand part of the metrics on where this particular retailer sales are this year, they're actually down. We're not even doing the same business as last year, and we're staring at a 34% increase in unsold suits, all taxable, as Jeff said, and as I pointed out in the example that we looked at earlier. This is what I think is important right now. Look at your data. Look at where it may not be for the entire store, but it may be certain classifications that were in this situation. And that's the technique and how to be able to see what your position is. Look, at 30%, in this particular case, at $60,000 more. Let's say the cost value is $30,000. 30% of $30,000, that's $9,000 that this particular retailer is going to pay just on the suits, just on additional taxation on suits that they haven't sold yet going into 2024. So I cannot estimate how important this is at this time of the year, at this point in time.
Yeah, and I think Dana's brought this up on previous educational sessions, that each classification in your business is like its own profit center. You have multiple businesses within your business. So just looking at overall numbers isn't going to tell you the story. You can have successes and failures all in the same underlying umbrella, and it's a matter of spotting those.
And that's why I like the action report, Nico. It's a good point, because instead of leafing through all your classes, right, to find these, it'll show up right there on that action report.
Yeah.
Right, and one comment just on
it's where you find your opportunities.
Yep.
All right, go ahead,
Right.
Jeff.
Yeah, and one comment just about inventory overall. If you underbuy, that's called, it's probably a bad word here, right? Underbuy. So you don't buy enough and sales are trending up, I'm sure you can call your vendors and they will have the merchandise you need, because they're all probably sitting with goods. So keep in mind is once again, let the vendor hold the inventory. If you buy the inventory, as we discussed, all of us discussed, you take the risk on, and you now have to pay the vendors. If you buy a little bit under what you think you need and you need more, I'm sure you can get the product, because a lot of vendors right now, as we discussed, have way too much inventory. You have too much inventory, and the distributors have too much inventory, because once again, things have changed in the last 6 months, and people are just holding too much inventory.
Yep.
Yep.
So we just had a question come in from an anonymous attendee, it says, and they're saying, regarding what Paul just spoke to, what are the best ways to attack these issues before end of year, which is a great segue into our next slide. Our audience is reading our minds.
Yeah, that was good timing. That was a good segue. So I just want, Nico, I want to jump back into what you said, and I do talk about this a lot, each category being a profit center. And I spent most of my career in a family-owned retail business, and my mentors always had one saying that prevailed over all sayings, and that is, good sales hide a multitude of sins in your business. and right now, right, if we look at those NRF numbers, 2021 and 2022 was a wild ride. We saw one of the biggest years in retail in 2021. We saw people, especially in those years, trying to get as much inventory as possible. There were supply shortages. People were taking whatever they could in, and it would sell. And now we're leveling off to a more to a reality in 2024. And so there is nothing more important right now than category management, right? Because you don't want to be in a position where you're underfeeding your inventory. You certainly, as Jeff just said, don't want to be in a position where, you're walking into January with too much. You can't, offload goods. So having a real understanding of where your category needs are from an inventory perspective, and what Paul was just showing on the reporting, it is so much more crucial now because we're just not in that unmitigated sales boom that we were in 2021, 2022. So when we talk about tangible actions we can take, well, let's think of the next big thing that's coming up, Black Friday, right? When we're starting to talk about where we want to be going into next year, the first step is identifying the categories that are vulnerable, right? What category am I sitting with too much old inventory and aged merchandise? And this idea of targeted clearance sales, and I just want to reiterate this, and Paul, this goes back to the kind of exercise you walked us through with cash in the bank versus cost of goods sold. Margin is not going to pay for your goods come January and February. Cash pays for your goods and new receivables. So when we're talking about walking into Black Friday, this is an opportunity. We don't want to just do blanket store-wide promotions that mean nothing. We want to get targeted. Where are you sitting with too much inventory? Where are those categories that you're in kind of a little bit of jeopardy walking into the new year and a little bit over where you'd like to be? And where could we start targeting promotions there, right? Because I know, and I still speak to retailers day in and day out, that when I start looking at their inventory with them and they're over and I suggest, hey, we're going to need to make some tough decisions on what to mark down right now, there's a tenseness there, right? And I always just go back to, margin is not paying for your new goods. It's going to be the cash that pays for it. So this is actually, there's a lot of silver lining here, because this is a great opportunity to take care of those, over inventoried categories in a really in a really organic way, because we have such a promotional time of the year coming up. So you get your new holiday product and you're selling that at full price. That's your gift giving. That's new holiday outfits. That's the exciting new stuff that's still landing in the stores. And then the aged merchandise, that's where you're able to really dig into that kind of clearance focused promotion and start moving some of that aged merchandise. So I think it's really important that we take advantage of the holiday season from two perspectives. One, new goods arriving and selling those at full price and getting people excited about the gift giving goods and new holiday merchandise. And then at the same time, you have your final sale clearance goods that people could come in and add on to the shopping that they're doing. And so it allows you to kind of move through some of that aged merchandise, build up your cash reserves, and start focusing on those end of inventory goals. And this should help relieve some of that. So Paul, I kind of think those go so hand in hand with the reporting that you were just showing, and how to actually add real tangible ways to actually go about lessening the burden going into January.
Yeah, I think the easy solution that people would knee jerk into is to cancel on orders, and that could be very, very counterproductive. And really, when we see the problems, especially the problem that we showed with the suit classification, Dane, it really wasn't about their on orders. It was about the existing inventory that was very, very old that they hadn't sold yet. And I think that's important to point out too. I know I always told this story. My wife and I used to go to London at Christmas all the time, and I remember walking at Black Friday into an Apple store there, and they were giving out 100-pound vouchers if you bought anything in the Apple store on Black Friday. They didn't have a discount going on, they didn't have a sale, but they were giving out these 100-pound vouchers that were only could be used in January. And what that was is they gave the incentive to their customers coming in to buy. If you buy something today, if you bring the voucher in and by the way, it's a voucher, not a coupon. You bring the voucher in January, you can use the voucher in January. I like that because it's an incentive then to get the customer back in the store after all the hoopla of the holidays and you're trying to get rid of inventory.
Yeah, I'm seeing that more and more as far as getting people back, offering the discounts, the coupons, but for the next trip in, not for the current trip, the next trip in.
Right.
But it's a way, listen, it's a way to get customer loyalty as this next slide talks about. It's a way to get them back in your store. You want to be the destination store because you offered them something different.
Yeah, that's a great point. You know, that's something that I've used in a few different iterations in the past, and it's a delight for the customer, right? They really feel like they're getting something out of it, and you're encouraging them to walk back in, and they will come back in with those gift cards to spend on new goods. And I just want to, you know, kind of double down on what I was saying before. It's really tempting, especially when we're starting to think about the Black Friday sales and you see what other people are doing, and especially the big box retailers. It's really tempting to say, I'm just going to go for Black Friday or for a weekend promotion. I'm going to do a blanket across the store discount, right? And that is maybe not the answer. And I think that when you're starting to think about these unique ways, there's not one way to do a promotion, right? And it really has to fit your unique needs. So product bundling's a great way. BOGOs are great ways. Mystery bags are great ways. That's a really unique one where you have a wrapped gift and you have a set price on it. And that's a fun way for customers engaged. So there are a lot of different ways to promote that doesn't just feel like you are giving a blanket promotion that's really going to ravage your margin, and especially protects what Paul was just saying, that on orders may not be your issue. The issue is the aged merchandise that has been sitting there for months and months. And so we really want to be specific. Again, how do we target the aged goods that we really want to turn into cash? And how do we protect the new goods that are landing that we want people to buy at full price and be excited about? And so there are ways of navigating this that's both, again, protecting your margin, but still allowing you to build that cash up and get rid of that aged merchandise. And I think that is such an important. And then finally, you know, donation and reselling, right? So, you know, there does come a time, and Paul, I'll let you say it best, where it's time to really say goodbye to goods. And that could be donating, or it could be, you know, having a nice bonfire for Christmas. But, you know, at some point, and that's a joke, but at some point, you know, merchandise should not have birthdays, and the goods that are sitting there that have been collecting dust on your shelves, collecting dust on the racks, there just is a point where we have to let it go, because it is just clogging up your open to buy and your ability to go out and buy new goods. And there's tax ramifications as well.
You know, I think a bonfire is...
Go ahead, Paul.
Okay, real quick. So just to get back to the bonfire. So I think that is kind of like a metaphor, right? To just, you know, what do you do with the goods? And we always say, and we're sort of kidding, take it out in the back and burn it, right? You know, I actually, Dane, this past year, met a retailer from Texas who literally sent me a video of they did the exact same thing. And I'm going to tell you, it was a hell of a fire. But there was merchandise, they said, that was up to 2 years old. And they said, forget about it. We're not going to carry it on the books anymore. So they burned it.
And listen, for any retailers here, you know, Paul's in Minnesota. It gets cold there. If you want to ship it to him, he could have it in the fireplace. It could be a nice toasty.
Yeah.
So before the bonfire issue, don't underestimate the value of giving something away for free. So when you
Yeah.
say, hey, spend $25 and you get this piece of inventory that isn't selling for us, but maybe it's interesting for the customer, they remember that. And it just adds loyalty to the customer coming back. Also, don't underestimate the value of just repositioning products in your store. When Paul showed the report a few slides ago, and you know exactly which products are not moving, and you're going to put a targeted sale against them, don't leave them where they already are in the store. Push everything either up to the front.
Up to the front. Up to the
Yeah,
front.
let
Yeah.
people know, look, these particular items are on sale. Same thing with your website. Put them on the homepage, move them way up above the fold on your website if you're going to be pushing them out. People aren't always going to dig all the way down in there.
Right. And that's really important, when I'm speaking to identifying the differences between new goods and aged merchandise, there's a very strong and compelling reason to really be able to merchandise that, whether it be in e-commerce or whether it be in the physical brick and mortar store. You have to let your customer know what they should be excited about, right? You still want to let your customer know, hey, these are new holiday arrivals. This is the hot new brand that we just got in. This is our #1 best-selling gift for the holiday season, or the trendiest items. And so you want to push those, whether it be to the front of the store, at the register, and then you want to have areas for the customer that is looking for some of those clearance goods. We can satisfy both needs, but you have to create that roadmap for the customer.
We have a question here, a few questions actually. So we talked about mystery bags, grab bags. How do you adjust that product out of the system that is best for your bottom line? I don't know if that would be a Paul or a Jeff question, but are there tax implications, I guess?
Well,
No.
let me jump in first, Jeff, and then I'll turn it over to you.
Good.
So there was another question I saw too, Nico, about what is the implication of marking stuff down on your bottom line? And the implication is it's going to lower your taxable profits. That's what you're trying to do. Is you're not going to show as much mythical profitability on your income statement, which is tax, which is basically, as I showed, based on too much ending inventory you haven't sold yet. So it will reduce your profits. Now, let me just say this as a caveat on that. Just be careful that you don't write off too much that throws you into a loss, because that could affect, and I think I'll let Jeff take over on that one, because that could affect your credit rating and a lot of other problems. So just be careful on that. So Jeff, I'll turn it over to you on that.
Sure. So obviously, as I mentioned a couple of slides back, is the vendor community is tightening credit, as are your private lenders. All the lenders request statements, your year-end statements, tax returns, whatever they want. Some vendors do require it. If you report to a factor, for example, if they're dealing with factors, it's part of the monthly. So adjusting inventory is an art to itself. You have to do it methodology with a certain methodology that does not throw you to a loss, unless you do have a loss. Okay, if you have a loss, you have a loss, right? But I don't ever want to see a client go from a profit of 50 to a loss of 100 by purely writing off inventory that, by the way, is probably sellable and maybe sellable above cost. All you did was defer the income tax situation to another year. Okay, but once again, as we all said, cash is king right now. Okay, if you, as I think Dane said a lot of it, if you have goods that are completely out of season, out of style, there are ways to get rid of the inventory, as we've all said. Okay, and turn that into cash. You've already paid the vendor for the goods. Now you want to generate cash. No, clearance tables, clearance racks, put it by the register, offer them a coupon. Listen, I'm always an advocate, by the way, of the sales team on the floor, and the register person is the most important person in the store for you to sell. They have to push the customers to the rack, this rack. Did you get everything you wanted? If they're trained properly, they hope they can push inventory out, okay? It'd be either accessories or clearance items. Because once again, as the statistics tell you, store traffic's down, as we all know. But when store traffic comes in, you have to have a higher closing rate, okay? if the people walk out of the store, what didn't they see? Is the wrong goods, the price points? You need to close when the people come to the store, and having the mix of clearance, new merchandise, and something they want to come for is a good formula to get them in the store, especially right now. There's a lot of competition for customers.
Yeah, and you mentioned yesterday on our call, Jeff, about loyalty programs, and that also goes in with training the sales staff, because then that's just adding
So these are
more
becoming more,
return
yeah.
customers.
Right. So this is becoming more prevalent with loyalty programs, be it a point system, a 10% off after 5 visits, some methodology of loyalty programs. Not hard to keep track of if you have a great POS system. There are third-party companies that do it for people, but you want to have them come back for a reason. If you offer, points, and if they accumulate X amount of points, they get, 25 off an item. That's something that hopefully that will attract them to come back to your store. And it's also a good way to accumulate customer data, be it emails and cell phones for texting, because I can't tell you guys all know this, how many emails you get a day, coupons, reaching out for ads, blast emails come out about these offers from stores. That's a good way to capture data. Even if you're a small retailer, the data is valuable, and it's a way to get the outreach to your customers. Saturday's 10% off the whole store. Now you capture the data essentially for free. You're not paying for it, and it just adds to the whole customer experience of selling the merchandise, be it old goods, new goods, accessories, whatever. It's a way to touch the customers more.
It's a huge value even now in 2023 versus a couple of years ago. People were relying on third-party tracking devices to get data, and those are largely going away. Google and Apple are getting rid of a lot of those trackers. So getting that first-party data is even more important going into 2024 for sure.
Yeah, and I just want to give a shout out. We have some great partners in the loyalty space, like One Shop. So we, if you're a Management One client, we certainly have a robust partner network for a lot of these purposes. On the last slide, we had Max Retail, who's a great partner of ours. That's a great end of the line way to offload or exchange merchandise that's not working for you. One Shop's a great partner in the loyalty and marketing space, customer retention. So, definitely one of the things that we pride ourselves here in the independent retail community is having, this really strong partner network. So if we can't, if it's not in our scope of work, we certainly have people that can help you.
And I just went ahead and put in the chat there. It's a link to our site where with all of our partners, including Max Retail, One Shop. We had one question too, speaking of partnerships. Person here, again, anonymous attendee. People are shy today. They're saying we use Shopify and our product analysis is off. It shows more inventory than we actually have, and products that are in our very low grade category, making up 5% of our revenue. Shopify is basically saying we need an additional app that can help clear our data out and more accurately reflect our inventory. Do you have any suggestions for inventory management?
Management One would be a great solution.
I was leading you into it.
I do know someone that could.
I'll make one comment, but this is a very common problem. If you go onto any platform, be it Management One, any platform, if your inventory is not right day one, what you get after it is irrelevant because it's never going to be right. You have to make sure that the inventory, be it a full count of the store, however you want to do it, it's got to be accurate the first day. If you don't do it right, after that, it's never going to be corrected until you do a count. So your data may be off because you don't have an accurate count when you implemented Shopify. Well, I've seen this too many times.
Maybe one sort of just to answer the specific question, one suggestion I would have is if you send that question into info@management-one.com, we can route it to our operations and tech department. Because you have a very specific problem related to archived products within Shopify.
Yeah.
And I think, someone in our tech team is probably best placed to answer that question. So we'll get back to you if you sort of fire that question off.
I put a link in the chat to, if you just hit the getting started button there, fill out the form. We're happy to speak.
And I will also, just to add a little more of a pointed response to that question. Shopify is obviously an incredible system, but it is a very app-based system, right? It's built as an open source POS that they encourage, different apps and different programs to help with some of the management. So their grading system, there are a lot of clients that sometimes are not getting the most accurate aged merchandise information from the grading system. And it's also going to depend a lot, like what Jeff said, of how you are receiving your goods, right? Are you consistently categorizing your merchandise correctly? Something as simple as, receiving something as a product type T-shirts versus T-shirts can change your entire inventory outlook. So it's really important that, and one of the things that we really do with our clients when we first start working with them is onboarding correctly, really having best practices in place, how you receive your goods, how you're inputting your data, because, it's the age-old saying, and we say this all the time, garbage in, garbage out, right? If you're putting it in wrong, you're going to get bad data on the back end. And I think that's what Jeff was alluding to.
Yes.
So,
yep.
Thanks, Dave.
And that's one of the reasons why Retail Orbit, our software here at Management One, was invented in the first place. A lot of retailers use things like spreadsheets and systems that are very prone to human error. And if you just make the smallest error when you're going deep into categories, it can screw up your analysis and you can't build solid strategies off of bad data. Joanna's actually saying they tried Hyperlink as a connector, but it's not really working that well. So they moved to Accumula, which is working excellently for Joanne. So that could be one.
Accumula is a great link between your POS and Shopify. So that is a great link that a lot of retailers use.
Thank you for that. We have a couple of questions that I do want to save just for the very end. We have a couple more slides that I want to get to quickly, and then we'll definitely open up the full Q&A. So talking specifically about timing, we have some people that think that it's okay to wait until January 2nd to start those post-holiday sales once you think the holidays are kind of winding down. One of the things that we recommend absolutely starting before the 31st, those 5 days after Christmas, before the 31st, people are flush with gift cards. It's a great way of trying to get that last second push of inventory out of your system before you have to count it for the year. The other one would be a very simple tactic. Just put a flyer in each of your bags and encourage people to come back. Very simple cash wrap. Make sure that they know you're still there after the holidays. So wrapping up, I think we perfectly addressed not waiting until the end of the year to address your inventory overages. Paul, I actually want to kick that one over to you because you are the one that really seems to light the fire every time you're educating our retail experts. Do not wait. When should they start doing this?
Well, I think it really that philosophy of markdowns is really appropriate 12 months a year. I think it isn't really just now; it's always. Dead inventory, non-selling merchandise, mistakes that you've made ends up being a cancer in your business that retailers don't really appreciate. And that cancer metastasizes itself through everything that you do, from creating higher expenses by hiring holding costs. As Jeff said, interest rates are going up. The customer visitation counts will go down because they see the same inventory over and over again. And so the real key is once you find that cancer, that you need to cut it out right away. And I'm talking about a fast markdown and a hard markdown. We're not worrying about making money at this point, ladies and gentlemen. We're worried about getting cash back into your checking account as fast as you can, getting that cancerous merchandise out of the store as fast as you can so that you can replace it with something that will sell better. That is the key. Time is a part of retail that independent retailers do not appreciate the importance of. The faster we move, the better off we're going to be. And if the first markdown is the cheapest, only if it works. There's no point trying to just save money on markdowns if you've got a $150 dress, and if you think it's going to sell at $129 after it didn't sell at $150, you're going to end up having half your sales floor on timid markdowns, which give you a sale image. And so there's every reason to be aggressive on markdowns. Think cash flow, not profit, and move on to the next thing. And I can't emphasize that enough. And that's true today, but it's true in March, it's true in May, it's true in October, it's true all year long.
Yeah, and one of these here we talk about a lot. I know during the pandemic, we even set up a 12-week cash flow projection for retailers. But even now, in just these next few weeks left in the year, build out a cash flow projection for January. Know where you're going to be at on January 1st. Have an inventory goal to start January.
The purchasing budget for next year, as we've all said, plan it out, but you kind of know where you're going to be and have it in your back of your mind so you can manage your cash flow.
Yeah, and the open to buy that Paul showed on the reports. Make sure that Q1 you are set, it's spent, and ready to be shipped by the year end. So you're starting off January fresh in Q1, starting off with those new goods. So we do have a couple of questions here I wanted to address quickly. Fiona, hey Fiona. Fiona's asking if your year end is the end of December and you do an inventory count in early January, can you adjust your year end inventory based on that January count?
Yes. Very, very, very common. If the inventory count is done January 10th, for example, which by the way is very common these kinds of days, and that adjustment would have gone back to the previous year, you absolutely can adjust it back.
Love it. We love hard yeses and nos.
Yeah, that's an easy one.
Going back to our Shopify link ups, Michelle is saying that RDI has done a great job for linking their POS to Shopify. So that would be another one to explore. And Nancy, so Paul, this is your first markdown is the cheapest question. Should the first markdown be 30 or 40%? That's
if 30%. Hey Nancy, how are you? Nancy's from Minneapolis too. Hey Nancy, if 30% will move it, yeah, 30%. But if you have to think about your first markdown on what's going to sell it. Again, getting back to don't worry about margin. If you believe 30% off is going to sell this inventory quickly, it'll be gone quickly, then of course 30% would be better than 40%.
And past markdowns would indicate that, because don't you, I forget the exact saying, Paul, but you mentioned that markdowns are a tuition paid on the education.
Well, yeah, and we're going a little over, but I'm going to end with that. I'm going to end with that because, look, and I'm sure Jeff would be the first one to reiterate this. Markdowns are a cost. They increase your cost of goods sold. They don't show up on your general ledger. They don't show up on your income statement, but they're every bit as real a cost as the rent you pay and the payroll you have. Correct. And thus, it is not something that I say this as flippant as just mark it way down and get rid of it. The key, of course, is when I say it's tuition that you pay on the retail, on the education of your customers, is learn from it. You need to understand, why didn't it sell? Einstein, I think, said, and Dane, if I'm not mistaken on this, if you do the same thing over and over again, thinking you're going to get a different result, well, it's insanity, right? So learn from it. Stop buying it. You know, go to my doctor. I go, doc, it hurts when I move my arm up, and you know what he tells me is, don't do that anymore. So, you know, learn from the markdowns, because they are a cost to your business. They cost in terms of image and cost in terms of financial costs. And that's really ultimately, Nico, I'm glad you brought that up, is the key to this, is to understand why you marked it down. Look, the number one cause of excessive markdowns now for most of our clients are not because they're bad buyers, is that they came to us because they bought too much merchandise, and that excessive inventory they had in excess of the traffic flow that they have in the store is the cause of excessive markdowns.
Correct. People do buy the wrong goods occasionally, but as you said, Paul, it's because they overbought based on a plan, and now they have to get rid of the inventory to rebuy next year, for example. But yes, and if you listen, I always tell people I'd rather be out of stock than have double the stock I need, because you can always reorder.
And fellow M1 retail expert Robert Reedy, he was kind of basically validating what you were saying, Paul. When it comes time for taking permanent holiday markdowns, the power of taking early action in December versus waiting until January is huge. You want to make sure that you're getting the most value possible as early as possible before that December 31st.
Huge. And remember, if you're having any type of promotions or sales during Black Friday, you're getting a preview. You're almost getting a built-in preview of what your customers are willing to buy when there's promotions. So after that, you should have a clear guide to what's selling, what's not selling, and go hard on the things that are aged, that have not sold and are still sitting there. I mean, you almost have the path being created for you. So
Dane, when you talk about going hard, we have a question that just came in here from Tom. He's saying, to stay fresh with new goods, should we avoid buying deep? I would think that it really depends on the velocity of the products. When you're assessing all of those categories, if you have a category that's running hard with great profitability, is buying deep necessarily a bad thing? Probably not.
Well, and this goes back, and we talk about this a lot on the road, but no, that is actually not the mentality. This goes right back to category management is going to be more important going into 2024 than in the past 2 years. And it's going to be super important that you buy deep into the categories that are turning and have good cash ROI for your business and good cash margin. And if you sacrifice there, if you buy wide and thin there, that's going to be a killer for your business growth. So you want to buy deep in the areas that are working, but it's knowing that information that's going to be the golden goose.
And we are 2 for 2 on audience segues, because that is the perfect segue for our next session on December 12th. Balancing categories based on consumer demands. Tom, I would absolutely recommend jumping onto that session. I just put a link in chat. This is actually the third of 3 M1 Accelerator Series sessions for 2023, but we are going to be creating a brand new series in 2024. So if you liked what Paul was showing you in terms of dissecting our reporting and diving deep into the numbers, the Accelerator Series is tailor-made for what you're looking to accomplish there. Gentlemen, we are slightly over, but I did want to thank everyone for coming. I thank our audience for submitting questions. Jeffrey, always a pleasure. And Dane, Mike, and Paul, we always appreciate your insights. We hope to see everybody on December 12th. We will certainly be sending emails out to remind folks that this is happening, and a recording will be sent out shortly.
Excellent.
Great.
All right. Thanks everybody for
Thanks,
attending.
everybody.
Well,
Good day, guys.
All right. See y'all. Bye.
Bye, guys.